Our Ukrainian allies claim 19,546 reports of unlawful deportation and forced transfer of children in the occupied areas of Ukraine by Russia. Let me say this again. People in Ukraine and organizations are claiming that Putin's Russia has separated over 19,000 Ukrainian children from their families, trying to turn them into Russians. How can you end this war unless every child is accounted for? The purpose of the hearing today is to make a record as to whether or not this claim is legitimate. I invited the Russian ambassador. There's his table. It's small, but that's the best we can do. He didn't show up. So this dispute needs to be defined and it needs to be resolved. Again, you cannot honorably end this conflict unless you account for every child taken by Putin's Russia from Ukraine, period. In terms of how this conflict ends, I think it's very important that Congress review what has been agreed to, that we have a say about is this a good deal or a bad deal, that if there are security guarantees, which there must be, that we'll review those guarantees and see if we can find bipartisan support to make them continuing past the Trump administration. Those are two things very important to me. Every child must be accounted for, and Congress needs to have a look at this deal if we can ever reach one. To the Trump administration, thank you for trying to end this bloodbath. All of us know we'll never get a perfect deal. There'll be sacrifices made. But one of the sacrifices we're not going to make is to give Russia 19,000 Ukrainian children. That's not a sacrifice I'm willing to make. I doubt if anybody up here is willing to make that sacrifice. This is not about land. This is about families. It's about the very fabric of society. How would you feel if it were one of your children? What would you want the world to do? I'd want the world to get my kid back. Is that asking too much? I don't think so. As to our Russian friends, they have 210 facilities people have identified, 39 sites where children go for direct military training, 130 sites that deal with their re-education, making them Russian. I'm not making this up. This is 2025, not 1945. This is going on in 2025, and it needs to stop. Russia pretty well denies everything. They refuse to work with the UN. They block monitoring. They have done nothing meaningful to resolve this issue. They're stonewalling us all. They're saying it doesn't exist. And this was a chance for Russia to tell its side of the story. They decided not to come. So this hearing is one of the most important things that any of us will do in our time in the Senate and in the House. Deliver justice to people who've had their children kidnapped by a foreign power. We have legislation, Senator Blumenthal and myself, that would make Russia a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law if we don't repatriate these children. One of the definitions making a country a state sponsor of terrorism, a section says kidnapping, and this is kidnapping. So we're trying to come together, all of us, to make Russia a terrorist state because they're acting like terrorists. And I hope we can move forward on that soon, and I hope we can find a way to end this bloodbath, but we got to do it right. So we're trying to provide as much visibility as we can to our European friends. Do what we're doing. Have a hearing. Get your parliaments together. Create your version of a state sponsor of terrorism. Let's work together hand in hand. Let's try to find a way to put maximum pressure on Putin's Russia to account for each and every child. Every parliament in Europe should be doing what we're doing. Everybody should be having hearings. And so we don't have a minute to delay. Senator Schott's been great to work with. This whole committee has been great to work with. We'll do his opening statement. We'll introduce our first panel, and thank you all.
Thank you very much, Chairman Graham, for convening this hearing and for your leadership on this critical issue. The systematic abduction of Ukrainian children by the Russian government is a horrific tragedy for the thousands of families victimized by Putin, but it's also an issue of global concern. Here in the Senate, colleagues on both sides of the aisle have been working to support efforts to track and return children and hold perpetrators accountable. That vital work continues, and I hope today's discussion adds to those efforts. But let me reiterate something that the chairman said. Any peace plan that lets Putin walk away from this war, having illegally seized Ukrainian territory, kidnapped thousands of Ukrainian children, and caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people on both sides with no consequences, is unacceptable. It would set a very dangerous precedent for the world, not to mention undermine future peace in the region. It is disappointing that the State Department declined to participate in today's hearing, but I hope that the administration will be briefing us about these talks very soon. As I noted, there has been a bipartisan effort to address Russia's mass abduction of Ukrainian children, and yet earlier this year, the Trump administration abruptly ended a contract which jeopardized the work to get critical data, including on abducted children, to the Ukrainian government and European law enforcement. It is one of the many instances where the administration has eliminated, undermined, or disregarded bipartisan priorities that are under the purview of this subcommittee, and why it's so important that we negotiate and enact a bipartisan state and foreign ops bill for the next fiscal year. The bill is critical for protecting American interests through targeted security and economic assistance for key allies and partners like Ukraine. And to do that well, the bill needs to restore transparency, strengthen the State Department's workforce, meet our international commitments, and ensure compliance with the law. We shouldn't have to wonder whether funds are being spent as we intended, or hear secondhand that critical efforts that we all supported are gone. For today, I'm interested in hearing from our witnesses about what's required to return, reintegrate, and rehabilitate Ukrainian children, and how we can best help. I'm also interested in how we can support law enforcement efforts, including national prosecutors and courts, as well as the ICC, which has indicted Putin for war crimes associated with the abduction of these children. I want to thank our witnesses today for their testimony, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Chairman Collins, would you, thank you for coming. Would you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to commend you and the ranking member for shining a spotlight on a truly horrendous problem. And I am happy to work with you in any way to send the strongest possible signal to President Putin, to Russia, that this is simply so wrong. It is a war crime. It is something that simply cannot be allowed to continue. So thank you very much for your leadership and that of our witnesses today.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Our first panel are our colleagues, two from the House, two from the Senate, Republicans and Democrats who have been deeply involved in this issue and every other issue related to Putin's war on Ukraine. And I thought it would be good to hear from you because you've been leading on so many ways. And Senator Blumenthal, we've had a great relationship over this issue, and it's now time to get some bills passed. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you very much, Chairman Graham. I've been to Ukraine 8 times since the beginning of this war. Most of those trips with you, Mr. Chairman, some long overnight train rides, and first and foremost, thank you for your leadership, which has been truly historic, without any exaggeration, on this issue. I also want to thank my colleague, Senator Klobuchar, for her leadership, which has been really instrumental, and our House colleagues who are here. Thank you. And to the witnesses who will literally testify as to the inhumanity and the criminality that we see unfolding in the kidnapping of these children. It's more than a war crime. It is literally genocide. It is genocide because the ultimate goal of abducting these children is to erase the Ukrainian identity. It is part of a strategic effort to erase the nation of Ukraine from existence. And Putin tried it by conquering territory. He continues that effort, and the attempted negotiations now ongoing in Moscow, we wish them well, but there's no sign of clear progress, and therefore we need to move forward with our sanctions bill, with the designation of Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, as well as an effort to use the seized assets. I witnessed firsthand the courage of the Ukrainian people and the brutal toll of Putin's assault, the bombing and missiles that are designed, again, to erase Ukraine and damage the people of Ukraine directly without any regard to the rules of war. And I have spoken to those, some of them, Ukrainian children who have been taken hostage. Of all the moments in my life of this privilege of public service, which we all have, this one will stay with me forever, talking to children about how they were declared orphans because the Russians killed their parents, or simply abducted by Russian soldiers. I cannot describe to you the absolute brutality and inhumanity with which they were treated. 10-month-old Margarit Propenko, who was kidnapped by Russians under the false pretense of medical examination and rehabilitation. Her name and citizenship were changed, and her birthplace was altered from Kherson, Ukraine, to Podolsk, Russia. In another case, 16-year-old Artem, forcibly taken by Russian soldiers to an orphanage where he said he slept, quote, on sagging metal beds, no bedding, just blankets, terrible sanitation. Every day we ate barley stew, strange compote, and crackers, end quote. 9-year-old Ilya lived with his mother in Mariupol when the war began. Quote, I loved my school and my friends, he said. We had a beautiful home. His mother was killed in a Russian missile strike. He buried her in their backyard. He was transferred to a hospital in Donetsk where he underwent surgery without anesthesia and was told by Russian doctors that he shouldn't say glory to Ukraine anymore. Those are just a few of the stories. Having talked to some of these children, I think the people of the United States should know about these atrocities, war crimes, genocide, as part of a systematic, deliberate effort to indoctrinate the children of Ukraine with pro-Russian ideologies and to delegitimize and deny their national identity. I was proud to join you, Mr. Chairman, along with Senator Britt and Senator Klobuchar in introducing this legislation earlier this year that would designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, part of a very exclusive club, well earned by Russia and Vladimir Putin. And I want to thank all the members of the United States Senate. I hope all the members. I challenge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to vote for this measure. And if you are in possession of an ounce of humanity, you will support this measure enthusiastically. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. You made me aware of this issue. I appreciate it. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Senator Schatz for leading this powerful subcommittee of people that have been leaders on this issue. You couldn't think of a better time for this hearing as these negotiations are ongoing, and we must stand with Ukraine, and I appreciated both of your words. So I recently returned from Rome, where 12 days ago I had the honor of joining the Ukrainian delegation sent by President Zelensky to meet with Pope Leo at the Vatican. I was there alongside Maxime, who will testify today. And it's one thing to have the numbers that we all use about the number of kids that are over there, some of them as old as teenagers, some of them as young as 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old. It's another to actually sit across the table from them and their families. I met Sashko, who was taken from his home in Mariupol after being wounded in a Russian bombardment. At our breakfast, he was there with his brave grandma, Ludmila, who told me she eventually took matters into her own hands, this grandma, when he was able to get a cell phone and call her, and she went into the occupied territory to rescue him. With the Pope, I stood next to Veronica, who was confined in Russia against her will for both her 13th and her 14th birthdays, including periods of time in isolation before she managed to escape. These are tragic stories of childhoods forever changed by brutality, but they are also stories of resilience and hope, the stories of the Ukrainian people who, against all odds, have continued to stand up to the brutality of Vladimir Putin. Veronica is attending school again in Kyiv, now in the 11th grade, and to see her big smile when she met the Pope and the tears coming out of her eyes as he gave her a rosary is something I'll never forget. More than 1,800 children have been returned, some with the help of the Vatican, and we were there to urge the Pope to use his standing and strong moral authority in the world to help return more children through mediation. I believe the Pope plays a critical role, but in the end, children should never be pawns in a war. And that is why Senator Britt and I joined you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Blumenthal on this important bill. But we must know, as you will hear today, how the kids are being moved in Russia through 200 sites, thanks to the incredible detective work of Yale researchers led by Nathaniel Raymond, who will testify today. His team has tracked the movements with biometrics and the like of some kids that don't even look like they looked when they were abducted because they were only babies. In addition to this important legislation that you're talking about today that I hope advances to the Senate, Senator Shaheen and I were just discussing this. Senator Grassley and I have a bill that we thank all of you for supporting in the NDAA. That bill would authorize our federal agencies to continue supporting these tracking efforts. I want to thank Representative Fitzpatrick for co-leading the bipartisan companion legislation in the House and Representative McCall for leading a related resolution. The U.S. is not alone in assisting Ukraine with the tracking and recovery of our children. Our allies are stepping up, and in September, President Zelensky announced a new initiative among several countries to share data and build up the capacity of Ukraine's own law enforcement. We all must do our part, and I'm pleased that First Lady Melania Trump joined us in this effort. But in the end, if we just sell out on some kind of an agreement that not only doesn't bring the kids home, but literally gives Russia territory that they don't even have right now, that's the message we're going to send to the world. So, Chairman Graham, I want to thank you for at this really important time having this hearing, and let's get these kids home. Thank you.
To show how important this is, we allowed members of the House to come to the Senate. Michael? You're up.
Well, Chairman, it's great to be in the House of Lords, the upper chamber. It took a while to walk over here. But I do want to thank you and the ranking member, Schatz, for holding this important hearing and having us from the House who care about this issue deeply. And we've been following this for quite some time. And you're putting a spotlight on this. And I can't say thank you enough. And I agree with you. In these peace talks that are going on right now, Russia needs to understand these children must come home. They must be repatriated with their families. We need an ironclad security agreement, unlike the 94 Budapest Agreement that didn't have that. And as I passed the wartime supplemental in the House, passed by the Senate, Russia needs to pay for its own crimes in the REPO Act. I met with the Ukraine ambassador yesterday, showed me a video that Save Ukraine put together featuring these children and describing the Russian atrocities. The Russian Federation has abducted at least 20,000 children that we know of. And every expert I've talked to believes the number's higher, much higher than that. They are also indoctrinating and militarizing Ukrainian children in the occupied territories, possibly up to 1 million. According to the video, Russia has allocated $7 billion in its 26-28 budget for a national project titled Youth and Children, essentially militarized youth organizations. The ambassador told me again that $1 million children live in the occupied territories, vulnerable to brainwashing and abuse, and more than 43,000 have already enrolled in Russia's paramilitary youth program. And I think really most frightening to me is in these territories, the textbooks spew false information and conspiracy theories about NATO and the free world. All this is part of Russia's effort to turn future generations against Ukraine, the United States, and Europe, because in their words, they are preparing for a large-scale war against NATO. It will not end at Donbass and the land bridge to Crimea. We have to be clear-eyed in these negotiations. Some of these children's parents are have been threatened and giving up their kids. They're shipped to Russia, stripped of their identities, tortured, forced to memorize propaganda, and told their country and their own families are the enemy. Finally, many of them are sent to the front lines of the Russian war itself. Imagine a child age 16 being sent to the front lines to fight against their own homeland. And Mr. Chairman, in the documentary Children in the Fire, I'd recommend everybody watch this. They show a child in a prison where adults use electrodes to shock them under their fingernails and genitals. And I hate to even say that in public, but it is so horrific. No child should ever have to endure that kind of barbarism. And to me, it's good versus evil, and this is evil in its purest form. And like the chairman, I've met with a lot of these survivors. I've met with many of them who were sent to Russian camps, and they described the forced indoctrination and the torture. As a father of 5, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, I can't imagine any of my children being kidnapped and indoctrinated against the United States of America. And imagine how Americans will feel if that happened to them. I'm thankful, Chairman Graham, for your leadership, calling attention to this important issue. And I agree that any peace must include the repatriation of these children, and it must include the ironclad security agreement. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. Unfortunately, the reporting I'm seeing out of Moscow shows Ukraine making concessions while Putin has made none. That is no surprise. I think he will drag this out. He will continue his behavior, including the kidnapping and abuse of the children, until pressure is placed on him and he's forced to be stopped. We must hold those responsible accountable and ensure this ends not only for Ukraine's sake, but for our own sake and for the world. Russia's attempt to re-engineer an entire generation is a battle plan. In their words, they are preparing children for war against NATO. This is a national security imperative, and beyond that, it's a moral imperative. And this is a time, all of us on both sides of the aisle, for moral clarity, because history will judge us by what we do here and now. And it will judge us how we respond today. So again, Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this important hearing. I look forward to working with you in this committee.
Thank you. Congressman Fitzpatrick.
Thank the chair and the ranking member, and to all of our Senate colleagues for allowing Mike and I to come here today. No matter what path any of us have taken here, whether we're here in an elected capacity, the media, advocates, supporters, I think we can all agree on one thing, and that is none of us have any higher responsibility in any aspect of our lives than to take care of our kids. That is our single most important responsibility that we have as human beings. And as we sit here today, there are close to 20,000 Ukrainian children who are living in fear, living in uncertainty, that are relying on us, people who have a position of authority, to not forget them, and not just to not forget them, but to make sure we do everything in our power, everything in our capacity to bring them home to their families. And there's nothing accidental about Russia's abduction of these Ukrainian children. This is not a byproduct of war. It's a calculated decision by Vladimir Putin. It is state-directed, and it is one of the clearest perpetuations of terror that this war has seen. Since February of 2022, Ukrainian authorities, as was pointed out by Senator Graham, documented at a bare minimum 19,546 children Every single one of those children have a name. Every single one of those children have dreams. They all have families that they love. And as we sit here today, they are living in fear. And they've been forcibly taken from their families, transported to Russian custody or Russian-occupied territories. These abductions are not random. They're not isolated. They are part of a deliberate effort that is specifically designed to do what Vladimir Putin has said he was going to do for years, to destroy Ukraine by erasing their culture and erasing their next generation of young Ukrainians. Silence in the face of such deliberate evil can never be an option for any of us. We have a responsibility and, more importantly, a moral obligation as human beings to make sure we take action here. And that begins with sending the following message to the Russian Federation. If you continue to kidnap Ukraine's children, and if you refuse to return every single last one of them home, you will bear the full weight of being recognized for what you have become, which is a state sponsor of terror. The bipartisan bill put forth by Senator Graham and several of his colleagues is a necessary first step, but it certainly cannot be the last. Congress can and must come together without further delay to sanction every single element of Vladimir Putin's regime. Every official, every institution, every entity complicit in Russia's assault against Ukraine must be held to account. And moreover, our adversaries must also be put on notice that if you enable the abduction of Ukraine's children or bankroll the slaughter of innocent Ukrainian civilians, the United States will hold you accountable. I want to thank Ukraine's ambassador to the United States for her partnership, for highlighting the urgency of this issue, of the staggering disregard in which Russia has for its human rights. And Mr. Chair, Mr. Ranking Member, we are reliving some of the most horrific parts of history, things that we thought were permanently relegated to the history books. When Germany invaded Poland September 1st of 1939, there were a lot of officials throughout the world that said it's a regional conflict. We don't want to provoke. We don't want to escalate. And what has history taught us? That a problem that could have been nipped in the bud early, because it was not, turned out to be the costliest and deadliest war in world history, where we had to send our own children to die on Omaha Beach. Those are the lessons of history. The decisions of Neville Chamberlain and the decisions of his successor, Winston Churchill, vastly different approaches that led to vastly different outcomes. And yet here we are today having that very same debate when history has already answered this question for us. When it comes to democracies standing up against dictators, there are two choices. There are two options. There's peace through strength and there's war through weakness. There is no magical third option. And history has recorded the decisions of our predecessors. History will now record our decisions and our actions here today. So let's make sure that we make the next generation that's reading about our actions here today proud of the decisions we made. And that starts with standing up for every single last Ukrainian child that's been abducted, never letting them leave our mind for 1 second, and work tirelessly and insist that every last one of them come home to their families. I yield back.
Thank you all for testifying. I know you've got a lot to do. We'll have the second panel. Senator Britt's been mentioned a couple of times. She's the original co-sponsor of this legislation with Senator Blumenthal and Klobuchar to make Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. So if you want to...
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you and the ranking member holding this hearing. I hope that this goes to the heart of every parent across our nation. Everyone. I mean, think about your child being ripped from your arms. Think about not knowing where your kids are on their birthday or milestones or tragic experiences. You've just heard Senator Blumenthal, Senator Klobuchar, others talk about torture, talk about having to undergo surgery with no anesthesia, talk about having to denounce everything they know and love, terrified, miles and miles away from their own parents. Look, I think allowing this to occur as a nation, it goes against the very fabric of who we are as a country. Think about that. And look, I join you in asking our European allies to step up and to do the very same thing that we're doing today. But we are here today because America must do something. And you cannot be a great nation if you are unwilling to do good. And there is no doubt that these kids need us. They need us to raise our voice. I want to thank the First Lady for her tireless effort on this. Senator Graham, I want to thank you, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Klobuchar. stand with you in bringing every one of these kids home and appreciate this. And I think we have a moral obligation to keep this going until we get every last one of them back into their parents' arms.
Well, thank you. Well said by all. We got 2 votes. We'll come back we'll try to vote at the beginning of the second vote, and our second panel, we'll hear from y'all just as soon as we get through voting. Thank you. We're in recess today.